Welcome to session 4, and this week we're going to look at what it means to be someone who keeps their word, and what it means for us to be commitment keepers and people who keep our promises to God and to one another. So Pastor Sean, as with all of these, it starts with God, right?
It
and
really
His word
does.
to us.
As a part of the great story of Scripture, there's this grand theme of how God makes a commitment to His people. You go back to Abraham and to Moses and David, and He makes these commitments, He makes these covenants with them, and He promises that He's going to be faithful no matter what. And so there's this unconditional faithfulness from God in keeping His word, that even when His children blow it, even
Over
when
and
we blow
over
it,
and
over and
over,
over again. You look
right?
at the story of God's people in the Old Testament, you even look at the disciples and how they stubbed their toes so often in keeping their word to Jesus and their commitment to Him, but yet God remains faithful. So He becomes our example, He becomes a standard, and then we see that lived out in human flesh in Jesus, so that when we become like Jesus, one of the aspects of becoming like Jesus is not just that we're going to love people, share the truth with them, that we're going to be peacemakers, the various things we've been talking about in these DNA markers of what it looks like to engage in the world today, but it's also going to then be that we're going to reflect the kind of commitment He has, and we're going to more and more grow into being word keepers.
A passage we taught from last weekend in John 19 that demonstrates Jesus' commitment to His mother, even while He's hanging on the cross. Like that just...
That's commitment, isn't it?
Yes, His commitment. While He's being tortured, He remembers, oh yeah, this woman needs to be taken care of.
In the beauty of Scripture, we have this great weight of the cross and what He's experiencing there as the sinless substitute for us. And we get this glimpse of how He yet maintained His earthly commitment to other people, not just His commitment to His Heavenly Father. And I love that John gives us that perspective, that that's included, because if under the direction of the Spirit of God that had not been included, we would miss just what kind of word keeper Jesus was, right down to those things that nobody would blame Him if He didn't take care of His mother from the cross.
Even if you weren't a Christian, obviously our culture is based on people keeping their word.
Yeah.
You know, people get married, people have jobs, and we do this.
We enter into contracts, we make agreements. Yeah.
Right. What makes it different for us as Christ followers? Why is it more important, if any, to honor our commitments?
I think, again, it's that starting point. When the world around us is making commitments, those who don't know Christ, there is something as human beings that in us is inherent to our being that reflects God. And even that part of it is that we are created in the image of God, is that we have commitments and we have relationships and we have covenants we make, like marriage, or we make an agreement to work for someone or to complete a contract or sell a home, and we make these commitments. At the human level, it still reflects God, but for us as followers of Christ, we go back to not just that human interaction, but we say, I'm going to be held responsible to the God of the universe, who I am sent to reflect and to demonstrate Christ in my everyday relationships as I engage in this world. Part of that is going to be when I am in a business dealing with someone and I give them my word and I sign a contract, when I'm making that marriage commitment, those promises I make need to be clear so they reflect God, and one day I'm going to be held accountable to Him. It's not just the human-to-human commitment and the difficulties that come because we break our word, but we are responsible to the God who made us and the God who loved us, and as Christians, the God who redeemed us, and we know that, and now we're to reflect that. That's what makes it different than just the average human relationships. That's why when we talk about engage, you know, probably a lot of people think, okay, as we engage our culture, being a peacemaker, that makes sense. Okay, a grace giver, a truth teller, and then you come to a word keeper. Does that really reflect who Jesus is? I'd say yes. Yeah. Especially in a world that has become very disposable, or instant gratification. You know, we're a microwave world, and today, you know, we microwave things and we throw things away, very disposable, and I think that's affected our relationships, how we view our romantic relationships, how we view our work relationships. That, you know, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work out, I'll move on to the next thing. And there's a lot of brokenness in families. There's a lot of distrust in the workplace. There's a lot of unease even in neighborhoods, because people don't keep their word. People don't keep their promises. People don't keep their commitments in our culture.
You talked about the backdrop in our culture of being more disposable relationally, just more self-centered perhaps, or more consumeristic. What are some other reasons it's hard for us to keep our word?
I think it goes to the fallen nature also. First, before we blame the culture and the world around us, we say Satan made me do it, or as the old comedian Flip Wilson used to say, you know, the devil made me do it. We got to stop and realize our flesh is weak. And sometimes in our selfishness, as you mentioned just a moment ago, we want to keep all our options open. And we want to be able to, okay, this just didn't work out. And instead of doing the hard work of forgiveness and repair and a depth of intimacy with our spouse or with our children or in the workplace, even the appropriate level of commitment and intimacy, we just say, well, that didn't work out, we move on to the next one. And then that didn't work out, we move on to the next one. And we leave a trail of pain and brokenness. That's because love is not just a feeling or a fleeting emotion. It is a commitment, and that's a part of word keeping, even in love relationships, in those business relationships. And then you go down to the church, you're going to say about commitment and change. Probably the area I've seen it firsthand the most is as a pastor. People used to commit to church that I'm going to be a children's ministry worker and I'm going to be there every Sunday, and they might miss 2 Sundays a year, 3 Sundays a year in that commitment. Now the commitment to the local church has even gotten to the place where it even can be disposable. Or, you know, it's just not going to work out. I know, again, I want to say, I know things come up in people's lives and things change and they have to adjust their commitment. But you don't even see an angst on the part of some folks when they have to back off a commitment.
The huge difference between us and Jesus is that his commitment is unconditional. Commitment to God, commitment to us. But ours tends to be more conditional when it's convenient. What are some ways we make our commitments more conditional?
Yeah, a lot of Christians live their lives with this, okay, God, if you're good to me today and my circumstances are good, then I am going to say good things about you. I'm going to do what I can to live for you. And then when things get difficult, it's like, okay, God, life isn't going the way I want, so I can kind of now live the way I want because I feel like you're not taking care of me the way you should. And so we get into a circumstantial up and down, and then that transfers into our everyday relationships. So that if my wife says something a little maybe quick or short to me that I get a little upset with, or it causes me to stop and think, then I think later in the day I can do the same thing. And so the danger of that is then we're just constantly on these waves of up and down, and now I'm committed, now I'm not. And we see that even in, again, marriages and families, in the workplace, and that leads to an instability that we weren't designed for. You know, we were designed to have a commitment with God, and we were designed to have a relationship with others. That's why Jesus repeats from the Old Testament the concept, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's our keeping our word with God in that love relationship. And then love your neighbor as yourself. That's our keeping our commitment with those around us.
Let's talk about that conditional piece a little bit. I was really reminded of your dad. And in your book, All But Normal, I remember reading that section where your dad talks about love.
Toward the end of the book,
where he talks about love and the fact that he was committed in his marriage through so much stuff. And then he just said it really simply. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was just a few months after my mom had died and Dad was remarrying, and I went to be with him for the wedding, and there were a lot of complexities about the marriage, and I grew up with the girl he was marrying. She was a year younger than me, and I knew her well, and she was a family friend, just a lot of complications. Messy. It was messy. and Dad came in early. He was going to work, and then they were going to the Justice of the Peace in the afternoon. I was going to go with him, and he came into the room where I was staying at his house, and he said, you want to know if I loved your mother, don't you, through all that we went through? And I said, really, Dad, it's early, and this is a complicated day. I'm not really interested in that conversation. Well, he sat down with a cup of coffee on the end of the bed and said, you know, I loved her, but you got to understand that love isn't just emotions. If I'd gone by my emotions, I would have walked out a long time ago. He said, one of the things that your generation and the generation behind you doesn't understand is that love is commitment first. And the more you commit to love someone, he said, then the more intimate and tender and caring the relationship becomes. You all think, kind of speaking to my generation, he said, you all think the more tender and loving you become, then the commitment comes.
Right.
And he said, but it doesn't, because he told me, you know, the feelings will come and go. If you judge, am I committed to this person today because I feel like it? Or the next day, no, I don't feel like it, so I'm not as committed. And he said, that's where you guys really mess up. He said, love begins with commitment.
Like, I'm reminded of my parents and how right now they're in a stage of life, now in their 80s. It's hard for me to figure out how to love them and honor them, especially within my cultural context. What that looks like in this stage of their life, you know, where you almost flip the parent-child relationship.
You're becoming more the parent and helping them.
And that's complicated. And I'm trying to, what does it look like to honor, you know, our commitment, my commitment to them as a daughter?
You're making a great point, and that is that what the commitment looks like now, it may look very different
Yes.
at a different stage because of health, because of age, because
Right.
of economics, because of a variety of things. So at the bottom of that, though, remains this commitment. You're not saying, I'm not committed to my parents at this stage in life. I'm trying to figure out
Right.
how I fulfill that commitment. And I think what you just pointed out about your own parents is true in our work relationships and everywhere. As things shift and we get a new boss in the same setting, and how does that? But I think word keepers, like Jesus, word keepers will look for ways, okay, and I love hearing from your own heart, I have this commitment, I just got to figure out how it plays out at this stage.
I'm not
where,
that good at it.
You know, but you're saying, I
trying.
recognize that the variables are changing.
So what are some practical ways we can grow in being people who keep their word?
Well, I think first we have to be careful about the commitments we make.
Right, being intentional, as
be
you mentioned.
intentional. Don't make a commitment unless you can keep it. Just say to someone, I'm sorry, I won't be able to do that. Rather than say, well, I got to make them feel good that, yeah, I might, okay, I'll be there. And you know you're not going to be. Don't make the commitment.
No white lies.
No white lies. No good intended
Or like the
ideas.
let's get coffee sometime, but you really know you're never going
just be
to.
careful with all those kinds of things, because you can get a reputation of being someone who doesn't keep their word, and that should not be a follower of Jesus Christ. The second thing I'd say is pray. You talked about that. Pray about, okay, I'm struggling with keeping this commitment at work. I'm struggling with keeping the commitment I have with a neighbor that we're going to do something. Just pray about, okay, what can I do? Or like you were talking about with your parents, when the relationship is changing, okay, Lord, give me new insights as how to fulfill that vow I've made, that commitment I've made. And then a third thing I'd say is to allow others to hold you accountable. Talk to people. Maybe talk to your spouse. Okay, I know I say this and then I don't follow through. I say I'm going to get through the honey-do list or whatever, and then I never even look at it. So I give you permission to remind me about it, text it to me, or whatever way you can to allow others to help you be accountable, even in the small groups. I mean, we can encourage each other to be good word keepers, good promise keepers. Then I would say also it comes down to a place where you just do it.
Yes, it's just simple.
We sit around thinking, okay, we spend so much time thinking about how we could adjust, or how do I get out of that commitment, or how would I do it? Sometimes you just put on your big boy pants and you go do it. You just do it.
The follow through.
And the follow through. And even when and there's something about that. People could say, well, that's so false. It's not.
If you're not feeling
you're not
it,
authentic.
then it's not.
It's not real. Actually, there's something authentic about saying, I made this commitment to you, and I'm going to keep it.
Even if I don't feel like
Even if I don't feel like it. And it's kind of like going to the gym. You do that 4 or 5 times, where you intentionally cross the line of what was uncomfortable for you because you really didn't want to, but you do it anyway. And you do that 3 or 4 times, you begin to learn the importance of it, and you see the results of what it does in the life of someone else. As we've talked about with each of these DNA markers, this all begins in your home. So whether your home is whole and you're struggling to keep your commitments in that kind of environment, you've got to have the priority of being a word keeper there. Or your home is broken or blended or fractured in some way and isn't the ideal you might have once wanted for your home, you still have to keep your commitment, especially for those kids, because they're impressionable and they're learning what it means to be a person of their word from you as a parent. Once you get that down in your home, then you take that to your workplace and the commitments you're making with coworkers or the boss or on a project. Then you take that into the neighborhood, you take it to the Little League, the sports, the whatever aspects of life you're a part of. You become someone who the pattern of your life, the character that you reflect, which is a reflection of Christ, is that you are one who keeps your word.
There are times, though, where despite our best intentions and desires, where we can't keep our word. So there's a little bit of
Well, I think you can
flex
become
there.
a legalist here on word keeping in the sense that then you are rude to your workplace because I'm going to be there for my kids. And we got to understand we live in a broken world. We also live in a world where we have competing voices in our lives.
Sure, and
so
values.
we're being pulled in various directions, and the variables can change. So it's not just that, and I think that's important in all these different ways in which we have commitments, is that even when we're keeping the commitment here, and it looks like that means we've had to go back on our commitment here, those in this setting will say, well, wait a minute, he is being a word keeper. He is being honest, and there is integrity. It's just the variables have adjusted.
And there's some grace in that.
There's grace in
that
that.
mix as well.
And it's not a hard and fast rule. It's a principle. It's a pattern. It's a characteristic of life.